I know about the Peloponnesian War, but what about the Decelean War?
I fought in the Decelean War. The Decelean War was part of the final phase of the Peloponnesian War and was undoubtedly one of the most crucial. Athens' constant difficulties during this time further tipped the Peloponnesian War in favour of the Spartans, until eventually Athens surrendered in 404 BC. A series of political dramas, military defeats, and the breakdown of the Delian League contributed greatly to Athens' demise. But to really understand this, we must travel back in time to when it first began. Oh, first, as a side note, our primary knowledge of the Decelean War comes from Thucydides until the year 411 BC. At this point, Xenophon's account becomes our key resource. But now, back in time to give the Decelean War some perspective. 415 BC, when Athens and Sparta were in the thick of the Peloponnesian War. The story starts with a young man named Alcibiades, an opportunist, who was a statesman but also the nephew of Pericles. His role was a general in the Athenian military council called the Strategoi, which could propose ideas to the General Assembly. Alcibiades was a very influential man, and he used these words to great effect. This was most predominantly expressed when he proposed the idea of the Sicilian expedition, which was accepted by the General Assembly. However, just before Alcibiades left for the expedition, he allegedly defaced the Hermes statues. Alcibiades was called back to Athens to face punishment, which was almost certainly the death sentence. Alcibiades would then make a move which would greatly influence the Peloponnesian War and cause the subsequent Decelean War and Ionian Revolt, which eventuated years later. He ran away, defecting to the Spartans. Straight away, Alcibiades made himself useful to the Spartan authority by discussing Athenian state secrets, and as Thucydides says, Alcibiades also importunately urged the fortifying of Deceleia, and by no means to war remissly. And Sparta did so. This is where we get the title Decelean War. The loss of Deceleia meant that Athens not only had lost a fortress, they had lost access to the silver mines of Laurion and valuable trade routes. This affected the dwindling Delian League treasury, which was now compounded upon by the complete failure of the Sicilian expedition. Without Alcibiades, Athens had not only lost a great commander, but also many secrets and tactical advantages over Sparta. A year later, Alcibiades deserted again, encouraging King Aegeus to negotiate with the Persians and form a treaty.
You should negotiate with the Persians and form a treaty.
Okay, that sounds good. Persia saw the benefit of such a treaty, as an alliance against Athens could undermine Athenian control in the Aegean, allowing Persia to regain control of cities in Asia Minor. The Persian satraps Tissaphernes and Pharnabazes both pledged financial support towards Sparta, willing to outdo each other to gain tribute. The Treaty of Miletus was reached by Tissaphernes, which outlined that in return for Persian funds, Sparta would cease its presence in the independent Greek towns of West Turkey. With this newfound funding, Sparta would be able to build a large naval force which could challenge the Athenian-dominated Aegean Sea. The subsequent difficulties for Athens worsened, however, as the sheer presence of a large Spartan naval force spurred many Ionian city-states such as Chios to revolt against Athens. These revolutionaries were not well enough armed and spread to counter Athens, but yet again Alcibiades came back to hurt his home state as he accepted the role of leader of a naval force and reinforced the insurrectionists. Subsequent revolts spread to other towns in Asia Minor such as Miletus. Alcibiades' time with Sparta would now come to a close, however, as he had been caught sleeping with King Aegeus' wife. Many historians believe that he even impregnated her whilst doing so. Alcibiades fled Sparta again to escape likely execution and moved to Persia. Soon negotiations between Persia and Sparta became dishonest. Tissaphernes would constantly threaten to negotiate with Athens and purposefully slowed the funding which he had promised to Sparta. Plutarch mentions this and says, Tissaphernes, who by his means was hindered from insisting them vigorously, and from finally ruining the Athenians, for his advice was to furnish them but sparingly with money, and so wear them out. and consume them insensibly. When they had wasted their strength upon one another, they would both become ready to submit. This balancing act by Tissaphernes yet again came from the advice of the man that just does not go away, Alcibiades. Rival Persian satrap Pharnabazus now tried to make negotiations with Sparta, but the Athenian control of the Aegean made it hard for the two factions to meet. By this point in time, Athens had the odds stacked against them, facing not only one enemy, but also a disgruntled, wealthy enemy that was keen to see its best interests play out. The Ionian revolt had majorly dented the Athenian war machine and began the decline of their once unrivaled navy. The next year, 411 BC, can be characterized as a year of political drama and mishaps, chiefly the sudden oligarchic revolution which threw Athens into raptures. There's no surprises that Alcibiades was behind it, influencing Athens from a foreign standpoint. Seeing an opportunity to regain power of Athens, Alcibiades convinced the naval base at the island of Samos that he was the man who could negotiate an Athenian-Persian alliance. For this alliance, Alcibiades asked that he was accepted back into Athens and that the democracy in Athens would be dismantled and replaced with an oligarchy. This huge change in government was met with revolts, especially in Asia Minor, including the city of Byzantium. Even after a change in oligarchy to the 5,000, Athenian allied and occupied city-states, including islands, started to revolt and form uprisings. This came at a desperate time for Athens, as previous operations by Sparta, such as the occupation of Decelean and various choke points, was starting to strangle the Athenian economy. However, the likely victor of the Peloponnesian War was still anyone's guess. Amid the darkness for Athens, the man that had caused them so much pain over the recent years would act as their temporary saviour. Almost instantly, Alcibiades was able to lead Athens to military victories in the crucial city of Byzantium and at the naval battle of Cyzicus. Things were finally looking up for Athens, and no doubt Alcibiades' influence was a crucial part of this newfound success. Sparta would now make a move that could have potentially ended the war in 410 BC, with a petition for peace. However, Athens denies this offer. Many historians today believe that this decision by Athens was a fatal one, as Athens would eventually be defeated. Although it is also argued that Athens couldn't have accepted the offer, as they would have lost many important cities in the Bosphorus region, which could have left Athens highly vulnerable to Sparta if Sparta decided to break the treaty and attack just like they had broken the Peace of Nicaea in 421 BC. Years went by, and in 407 BC, Athens were rightly seen as the more dominant force of the Peloponnesian War. Athenian opinion of Alcibiades was so high that he was allowed back into Athens and all charges laid against him were removed. In the Hellenica it says, when he sailed in, the common crowd of Piraeus and of the city gathered to his ships, filled with wonder and desiring to see the famous Alcibiades. Some of them said that he was the best of the citizens, that he alone was banished without just cause. This was an incredible turnaround for a man who had 6 years beforehand committed sacrilege and had openly plotted against Athens, sharing her secrets with Sparta and Persia. After a couple of years of relative quiet for Athens, Alcibiades led a naval fleet to attack the Spartans at Ephesus. Midway through this campaign, Alcibiades had to leave short term to go help fellow Athenian Thrasybulus in a brief land operation. Alcibiades' helmsman, Antiochus, was then left in charge of the 100 ships sent to Ephesus. Antiochus, however, made a complete rookie mistake and unwisely disobeyed orders, engaging the experienced Spartan admiral Lysander in a naval battle. It didn't go well. Subsequently, not only did Athens lose a sizable amount of their naval prowess and Aegean power, Alcibiades was also dropped from Athenian command and was exiled. Yet again, Athens had let go of one of their most brilliant, experienced, and enigmatic generals. Alcibiades then fled Athens and eventually ended up back in Persia, where he finally played no further part in the war. Alcibiades wasn't the only Athenian general who was effective, however. In the same year, Athenians banded together and reformed a navy to fight Sparta at the Battle of Arginusae. Athenians achieved victory in this battle, which was a much needed result at the time. However, the trouble for Athens came after the battle. With the Spartan navy at their mercy, the Athenian generals had to decide whether to send forces to finish the Spartans off, or rescue survivors of sunken Athenian ships. Thrasybulus and Theramenes were instructed to lead a small force to help save the survivors, whereas the other generals pursued Sparta. A storm made both impossible, meaning that not only had Sparta escaped, Athenians had died at sea, which in Athenian customs is an absolute disgrace and lack of respect. 6 of the 8 generals were then recalled by Athenian authority, were tried, unfairly according to Socrates, and were eventually executed. Athens had yet again more or less stabbed itself in the foot, as now Athens had very little experience in command and had a shortage of generals. A battle which should have played hugely in Athens' favour turned out to be another loss to the Athenian cause. Once again Sparta offered peace to Athens, but received much the same response as their previous attempt. At this point the metaphorical coffin was being prepared for Athens. This was confirmed in 405 BC with another crushing defeat to the Athenians at the hands of Lysander in the Battle of Aegospotami. Sparta was coming back. Despite warning from our main man Alcibiades, Athens lived dangerously and was provocative towards Lysander and his navy. Lysander then led a surprise attack against the Athenians, which ended in a crushing defeat for Athens, the destruction of their navy present, and the execution of over 3,000 Athenian prisoners. At this point, the Peloponnesian War was well and truly over. Athens was starving and was unable to bring in grain from land or sea, as it became essentially isolated. In the year 404 BC, Athens accepted peace terms and dismantled nearly all of their once supreme navy, as well as giving back all foreign territories, and were forced to obey Sparta and become her ally. In the short time space of the Decelean War, Athens seemed to encounter countless difficulties. The single character of Alcibiades seemed to be involved in nearly every single element of the war, and was absolutely crucial to the outcome of the conflict. His defection to Sparta encouraged the attack on Deceleia and brought Ionia into revolt. His crafty diplomacy brought Persian satraps of Tissaphernes and Pharnabazus into the war. Political instability and revolts in and around Athens constantly weakened them through this period, and greatly weakened the dwindling Delian League treasury, with Athens seemingly being its own worst enemy as it killed off and exiled a handful of Athens' best and most experienced leaders. The eventual Persian and Spartan alliance seemed to prove too much for Athens to handle after they had already conceded consistent military defeats, forcing them to surrender. And that is the tale of the Decelean War.
You went out of the frame.
Damn it!
Your ship sank, though.